minutes, and then we'll go to the questions. Hello, welcome and good evening. My name is Misha Glenny. I'm the rector of the Institute for Human Sciences, the IWM, here in Vienna. And it is a particular pleasure for me to introduce tonight's guest, Martin Shimečka. The reason it's particular pleasure for me is that many, many years ago, during the dark days of communism, I used to go and visit his father, MILAN ŠIMEČKA, because Martin is part of a three-generation sort of wonder group of Slovaks. MILAN ŠIMEČKA wrote a fantastic book called The Restoration of Order about the post-1968 circumstances in Czechoslovakia. He was a very, very prominent Slovak voice in a dissident movement which on the whole was dominated by Czechs. But Martin, his son, picked up Milan's baton and ran with it as a writer, as a novelist, an essayist, and an extremely influential commentator, particularly in the post-Cold War period of the 90s and 2000s. Became one of the most recognizable figures in Slovak intellectual and political life. And then his son, Misha Šimečka, is now basically the leader of the opposition. In a country which since September 2023 has turned veered slightly away from democracy, one might say, towards autocracy in the person of Robert Fico, Prime Minister, and his government. And although things are looking, as we all try and process the tsunami of Trumpian executive orders, things are looking slightly uncertain, unstable at the moment, and we have the possibility of the FPÖ leading the government here in Austria. We have Orbán, we have Fico. Babiš is looking good for the Czech elections next year. There are also uncertainties for people of that ideological bent, as we're seeing at the moment in Serbia, where the autocratic government of Vučić is now under severe pressure from popular student-led protests across the country, not just in Belgrade and Novi Sad. And Slovakia itself sometimes tends to get unnoticed and is passed over, but it's actually a very important piece in this larger puzzle of political realignment and uncertainty that we're seeing at the moment. So it's with great pleasure to introduce Martin, who is going to give us, I'm sure, very, very valuable insights into what's been happening in Slovakia, where's it going, and what it means both for Slovakia and the region. So I'm going to ask Martin to speak first of all for 30 to 40, 45 minutes, however long he feels like talking, before I shall pose a couple of questions, and then I'll throw it open to the audience. And finally, after we are all sated intellectually, we can then sate ourselves with wine and cheese down in the kitchen. Fantastic. Martin.
So thank you, Misha. I'm happy to be here. Actually, I'm here as a fellow on IWM, and living in Vienna is just for me a kind of extraordinary thing, because I don't want to be long, because in Vienna is particular for me a town where my father, you mentioned, so Austria and Vienna, we watched Austrian TV through communism all the time, so I knew Vienna much better than other Slovak towns, because I watched ORF all the time. And it was interesting for me. One of the most interesting experience in my life was when, after 89, I got a passport. So the first thing, of course, was come to Vienna. And it was amazing experience. I knew the streets, I knew the town, but it was for me until my 32 years of my life, it was like on Mars. And now I just appeared on Mars. seeing that everything is really real. It was just amazing experience. So to be in Vienna is for me a wonderful, wonderful feeling. So thank you even for being here. But on the other hand, of course, looking from Vienna to Slovakia, well, I know. I mean, Slovakia is not an important country. It's a small country with 5 million people. It's in Central Europe, the smallest, without any real impact in the history, of course. And well, they may be the only now. The reason why we should talk about Slovakia is there are two reasons. One, because Slovakia is not by definition, but because it's a member of European Union, so it's more important than it would be without being a member. The second reason in that Slovakia is a country where there are decades of the modern history after the split of Czechoslovakia. Slovakia was a little bit, all the time, kind of a lab for the political developments and symptoms and phenomena which were, I don't know whether you know, some of you might know that Slovakia was actually the first front runner of populism in early 19th, when in 92 came to power after the split. Vladimir Mečiar was the populist, very primitive form of populism, which we are now witnessing all over Europe and Western Europe. Mečiar was a very primitive, but it was already in Slovakia. We were actually the first country where the populism, as such, we saw what that could have done to the country. Well, it ended well by his defeat in 98, whatever. But now, what we see in Slovakia, there had been elections in September 2023, where in elections which won today Prime Minister Robert Fico with his party Smer, and then he created a coalition with the two junior parties, and from that time it happened something which well, I expected somehow, but I was still surprised. Surprised by the symptoms and phenomena of what we can see around the world in various autocracies, but I was surprised by the speed and brutality, how it all happened. So I will try to explain in this introduction what happened and what are the symptoms which are specific for the Slovak Republic, but also might be symptomatic for the other autocracies or of regimes which are now we are looking with a fear, for example, to US, where Trump sometimes, in some cases, reminds me of Fico. So I'll try not to be too specific about Slovakia, but to talk about more broader symptoms of what's going on. And I think when we probably many of you have read Anne Applebaum, Autocracy, this new book, when she describes the symptoms of autocratic regimes and the leaders, and concerning Slovakia, she's right in a couple of things. When she says that autocrats actually don't mind about the public anymore, so they have the power, they want to survive and to be in power. And that's the thing where I see actually most of the public doesn't trust the government of Robert Fico now in Slovakia. Yes, the trust for the government is about maybe 25%, which is very low. Even in Slovakia, the much bigger trust have European institutions, a European Commission, than Slovak government itself. But Mr. Fico doesn't care. He doesn't care about public opinion. And the other thing, if when Applebaum says about how she describes autocrats, that they are mostly men, of course, who feel that they are untouchable, that they are even immortal or whatever. And you see that Mr. Fico is behaving like a man who you ask, I mean, why are you doing it? You don't know that it could have some really bad impact on your future, because, well, what you are doing is almost criminal sometimes. He seems not to understand. He's like Mr. Trump. He seems not to think about what will be in the future. When you look at that, it's really weird. Well, and then there is, of course, I mean, also what is the similarity of the autocrats, like or would-be autocrats like Mr. Trump or Mr. Fico and the others, is the brutality of the speech, of the language. It's just Mr. Fico was all the time, from his beginning, kind of quite a aggressive vocabulary, but what's going today is just it's out of any norms, similar to Mr. Trump. He talks about his enemies, how he would strangle them by his own hands, and that they are the rats and whatever the animal speaks, and enemies of state, of course, in the most brutal language you can imagine, similar to Mr. Trump. And he's continuing in doing that. And look at that and think, oh, I mean, what is this? The explanation is probably that he knows that his voters like that. So he's doing that because of his voters, and he doesn't care about the others. However, the brutality of language is one typical symptom of the autocrats we saw all over the world, and Mr. Fico is fulfilling that completely. Now, I mean, when I look at what's going on in the US now after Mr. Trump is inaugurated for president, I mean, everybody is shocked by the speed of his, decisions and what he's doing around. But actually in Slovakia was the same. The speed is just shocking. I'll try now to just describe shortly what happened. First of all, when Fico became a prime minister, he started a big campaign because he needed parliament. He had a coalition in the majority, not a big one, but still a majority, to change the criminal law and to actually destroy the justice, especially prosecution and police, to take it under his control, which took him a couple of months because opposition was fiercely trying to stop it, and there were protests on the squares and whatever, but he managed that. He managed that, he managed the law, the criminal law, or criminal or penal codes, or whatever we can call it, that his that the penalties or the for criminals, for corruption, for organized crimes are not much lower, maybe half of that harsh than the previous penalty code. And the time when something happened, the crime happened, and the time you still could be investigated for that was shortened, sometimes only for 10 or sometimes even less amount of years. The aim was to free his own people either from prison or from prosecution, because they were running off a lot of prosecution of his partners, and Fico himself was sued for organized crime as a politician who created a corruption system in Slovakia in the previous times. So the explanation for this, for the speed and the well, brutality, how he pushed that, was of course that, and as another symptom of autocrats is that he was scared in the previous parliament, previous government, that he would go to prison, which would probably happen if he wouldn't win the elections. Some of his friends and colleagues and inmates in political life already spent some, well, months, some even year in prison. So Mr. Fico's desire to win the elections and the motive and the energy he put to and changing his own political agenda from whatever populism to far right was to win the elections. This is the same story as Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel or Donald Trump in America. All these would-be autocrats faced criminal or penalty or the prison if they did not win the elections and got the immunity. So that's a weird but very symptomatic part of the energy and the desire to do anything for your victory. When you forget all your ideas or whatever it is, you do everything to win the elections. And when you win, when you become to be in power again, you start. First, what you do is to save yourself for the future. So you change the criminal code, you control the justice, you control the police. That's what Mr. Fico has done very efficiently in half a year. He cancelled. There was in Slovakia we had a special prosecution office for the big corruption and organized crimes. He cancelled that in a couple of months by law. And he changed the criminal law and code and all these kind of things in such a speed that at spring he already could feel safe because even in the future he couldn't be prosecuted anymore. The thing is that when we think that if Mr. Trump or Mr. Netanyahu or Mr. Fico, when they succeed in to save their own life, not to be in prison in the future, that would be for them enough. Well, that's a mistake to think about that, because there were some rumors. I mean, there were people who thought, well, okay, this is what Mr. Fico wants to. Only to secure himself, and his friends, of course, not any time in the future to be in prison, and now he will govern like a normal politician. That's not that thing. What is the strongest emotion is not only fear what these guys like Mr. Trump, Netanyahu, or Mr. Fico, the emotion of fear that they could go to prison. It's not the strongest. The strongest, it's appeared, is the revenge. Desire to revenge your opponents, whoever threatened you. So Mr. Fico then continued to revenge, not only to, or try to revenge, for all society or that part of society he believed is against him, by various things which have not big meaning in a sense of creating the whatever authoritarian regime, in sense that in a year in Slovakia, I mean, the Minister of Environment, from government. Actually, the problem is that the damage he made to the Slovak nature is so huge that it will be difficult to repay maybe in decades. What they made to the forest, that they killed bears and wolves because they are the enemies. The nature is the enemy. It seems like, of course, we know that behind that is a business of hunters and companies which produce wood for the factories or whatever. But at the same time, you look at that and you can't get it. What kind of hatred it is against the nature? Why? And it seems to be the revenge against all those, liberal guys who protected the national parks and nature, because they're the same party, same group of people who love the nature. It's the same community which love the culture, for example. And the culture, the same like in the nature. And this is a pretty specific. Year after, the culture in Slovakia is damaged in a way you wouldn't imagine it's possible. So, new Minister of Culture, who used to be a moderator of some TV shows, whatever, but now she's from Slovak National Party, the junior partner of the coalition, and she's a far-right, racistic, or I would say neo-fascist type, hating the culture.
You mean Austria?
Yeah, well, Austria will be the case. Yeah, that's why I'm talking about it. So, I mean, just be very brief. She fired hundreds of people at Ministry of Culture, and she fired the director of Slovak National Museum, Slovak National Theatre, Slovak National Gallery, and other institutions. Just 2 days ago, the Slovak National Gallery is a fantastic institution, renovated, whatever, but they have galleries all around Slovakia, about 300 employees. Just 2 days ago, almost half of the employees already are announcing they are leaving Slovak National Gallery because they can't work. And the guy, because she appointed the guy, actually is already the third one, some kind of auditor or economist, whatever, nothing with the culture has any near the culture in his whole life. So the National Gallery will just collapse. In 2 months, it will just collapse. The National Theatre still works because the actors, they are afraid to kill it completely. So it's working on. But Slovak National Gallery, Slovak museums are already shut, some of them, and they will go on. You ask why they do that. Because the meaning of that is why? And this is a specific thing, which might be typical Slovak, because unlike Orbán autocracy today, which we can say it's autocracy already, or how it was in Poland in Kaczynski's government, the Polish and Hungarian society and they had two types of elites. I mean, which were, well, more or less we shouldn't judge it by intellectual competence, but at least they had the elites. Among them, a lot of writers, journalists, the conservative, who could take the positions of those who were fired from the liberal part of them. So now you have Orbán made it that culture is completely controlled by Orbán. Not only controlled, but also there are the ideas the culture under Orbán system should do. I mean, to be conservative, heroic, nationalistic, whatever it is. But there is a kind of idea, and especially there are people who are willing to do that. There are a lot of, I mean, hundreds of people among writers, artists, directors, theaters, even universities, of course, and so on. So you have the elites, which Orbán could rely on the elite which supported him, or still supports. But in Slovakia, it's not the case. The Minister of Culture, and in Slovak culture, it's like there are no this kind of, I can't describe it, let's say autocratic, conservative, populistic writers or journalists or artists, whatever, because 95% of Slovak culture, which is very nice actually, is actually liberal, completely. I mean, totally liberal. So when you have not enough people to change the one part of the culture to for the other, you not have enough people. So the only way how to deal with the culture is to destroy it. So that's why Minister of Culture, she couldn't find any other director for National Gallery. So she put there some econom, whatever guy. The same happened to the museum. There is a big fund which was created 15 years ago, very good one, independent, with budget of 30 million euros for a year, which supports by grants the various cultural events all over the country, even in small towns, villages, festivals, libraries, whatever. This is all over. She changed the law about the fund, and the fund until now just doesn't work. These 30 million euros, they even don't give it to the others because there are no others they think they can you can give them. So they just stop the funding. And that Slovak culture is dying, virtually dying by, I mean, lack of money. Of course it will survive. What I'm talking about is absolutely, I mean, well, think, you watch the destroying the culture completely merciless just because you hate it. It's not because you have any idea. It's just because you hate it. So that's another symptom of which, of course, you see can have various other solutions, like in Mr. Orbán, who creates the other culture. I mean, which is supportive for authoritarian regime, and probably Mr. Trump will support the culture which is anti-woke or conservative agenda, which are a lot of people who can make it. I mean, so that's another thing. But in Slovakia, you see it can be even worse. You can destroy it completely. So there are the things which, when you look at that, the speed and brutality, how it is happening, is shocking, even for those who never were somehow obsessed by politics as I am. So many people are really now wondering what is going on. What is going on in this country? Because the other phenomenon, even if you are not a political engaged, if you are not liberal, whatever, you are just a normal guy, you might even have voted for this coalition. The problem another problem and symptom of these autocratic whatever governments is completely incompetence. That's which you might think that the state can survive any incompetent government, of course. I mean, probably survive, yes, but in how what kind of shape? This government is the people around Mr. Fico are so incompetent that Slovak citizens witnessing actually almost a collapse of healthcare system in a year. Well, there was a mass protest of the doctors and sisters, nurses who threat by leaving the leaving the hospitals because they are not satisfied not only with the salaries but all the system. At the last moment they saved it not to let them go, but it's already in a situation it's so fragile that any time the system can collapse. And the health is something everybody cares of. But it's due to complete incompetence of the government. It's not because of, we can talk about everywhere the healthcare system is complicated, but in Slovakia it's obviously the result of incompetence of the minister and the government. And even Mr. Fico, who says, oh, it's not my problem. I mean, minister should solve it. Of course he didn't. The other thing is infrastructure of the states. I mean, we have to say that Mr. Fico is the prime minister in his 4th period already, so he had governed the country, I don't know, 13 or 14 years already. So of course it's a result of his governing, so that the infrastructure of the country is, the trains don't work. I mean, they are most of the time late. There are not enough people who can run the machines. The bridges are collapsing, and we will see that. So the result, the country was already prepared for that, because I mean it's like the infrastructure of the country was not very good on already before. But you need a really competent government to somehow to save it. I mean, to do something to repair it. But this government is not able to do that. So the situation is worse from day to day. I mean, just a small example. At the beginning of the year, you have this office, which is, what is it? Catastry. I mean, it's where it's on website, on digital format. All property, all land, property, your house, everything is there in the system.
Cadastral register.
Yeah, register. It collapsed by some hacker attack in beginning of January. So it was shut down. So for 3 weeks, the property market collapsed because you couldn't have any information about even your house, whether it's registered or not. They said it was hacked, which probably was, by some hackers, whatever. But the problem was that the incompetence of the government, which was not able to expect that, and the head of this office was just a guy nominated by the government who just didn't care about the digital or cyber security. So that's just one example of how it is day by day. You see it's not a collapse directly, but the symptoms that state just doesn't work. So the thing is that this is, of course, interesting case, because this is a similarity already. This is a similarity of the autocracy in Hungary, because Hungary state is in a very bad shape. I mean, healthcare, education, economy is going just down. So the autocrats we are talking about are mostly incompetent, even if Mr. Orbán is not a stupid guy, but somehow they don't care. Like Anne Applebaum says in her book, they just don't care about their countries. They care only about themselves and their money, because all these systems are kleptocracies. Of course, I don't go into the details. Slovakia is, of course, the case. So, talking about that, this is kind of a disaster picture. But if you go to Bratislava, you wouldn't see it on the first sight that it's so bad. But people feel it. People feel it, are quite unhappy about it. Now, if we talk about how efficient in this structure is Mr. Fico and the government, we should also talk about what he didn't succeed in to do. And why is that? If you, like Mr. Orbán, which is a case study for successful creating authoritarian system in 14 years, step by step, what do you need? You need, and it's not I mean, everybody knows that, of course, you need to control justice, police, army, definitely, of course,
Media.
and media. Mr. Orbán was clever enough to prepare himself to kill the independent media in the country or to buy them by his own oligarchs very successfully. So in Hungary now, well, the most of the media, mass media, like TV and the big websites or papers are in, and regional papers, of course, are the hands of Orbán's government, completely. In this way, Mr. Fico didn't succeed in, and that's a big difference. For various reasons, I don't want to go into the past too much, but the thing is that Mr. Fico, on one hand, is with Mr. Orbán very good friend, and Mr. Orbán tries to help Mr. Fico by advice and everything. But in one thing he cannot, because Mr. Fico never believed in controlling media. Is it wrong? Because he was convinced that he could win elections against the independent media, because he believed, and he was right, in Slovakia, well, a big part of society doesn't believe in media. They believe in conspiracy webs, conspiracy media, or they believe in politicians, but not in media. They don't trust them. So Mr. Fico won more times the elections by saying, don't trust the media. So he didn't need even to control them, because his voters didn't trust them as well. But this has changed, because now his government is under attack of the independent media, which survived the 30 years of even some Mr. Fico's governments, and are quite strong, much, much stronger than in Hungary. And I would say it's comparable to Poland. Even the situation, even maybe better, because in Poland, under Kaczynski's government, the state TV was completely under control of the government, which this public TV in Slovakia, of course, they have fired the director and so on, but it's still they couldn't somehow control it. So the public TV is mostly boring and not very interesting, but you couldn't say it's a propaganda machine of the government. Then you have the biggest TV, commercial TV, with a far reach and with the news, which by tradition are the best TV news in the country, critical, independent, very professional, with a big, well, hundreds of thousands of people watching it. And there was a big battle about this TV. Mr. Fico tried to punish them, the TV, by canceling them advertisement for state companies. And of course, because the owner of this TV is a Czech oligarch group, Mrs. Kellnerová, whatever, PPF, which has business in Slovakia. So Mr. Fico had some tools to at least to make this TV weaker in this critical tone. But he didn't succeed because the journalists started to revolt. So it's a big story, at least for now, successful in a thing that the journalists are doing their job very well. And then you have in Slovakia independent media which are quite strong. I remember one of them is Daily N, which is the success story, which would be for another lecture. You have at least 3 papers and websites which with a big reach, which are independent, critical, and Mr. Fico, who all the time talks about them as enemies of the state, is not able until now to do anything with them. Unlike in Orbán's Hungary, these media are mostly like the Indian. It doesn't depend on advertisement, because it depends on subscribers. It's a website which mostly is living from the subscribers. This Daily N in small market in Slovakia is 70,000 subscribers, which pay monthly, what about 10 euros? I mean, it's a profitable medium, profitable paper, strong enough that Mr. Fico is absolutely furious. But he cannot do until he can ban it. But in your opinion, it's not easy. So the question is whether you can, and that's a question which should we ask for all the other regimes would be autocratic. Is it possible to create autocratic regime where part of the society, which is in Slovakia, it's at least maybe not the half, but at least 40% against the government, and there is, you have the gray zone of the 20 of the undecided, whatever. Can you rule the country, an authoritarian ruling, with such a big opposition among the population and with independent media? In my opinion, no. But maybe I'm too optimistic. The thing is that the government is facing losing its majority already, because there are some MPs under the pressure of the media, of the society. Slovakia is a small country, so there are now 4 MPs who are all resisting to support the coalition, and the coalition now has 79, but needs 76 votes in parliament. But 4 of them is already losing the majority, because these people have their families, their friends, they read the papers. They don't want to be assholes for the whole rest of their lives, being attacked by their friends. What kind of stupid guy you are, you're supporting this government. So that's one thing. So the government is already maybe not collapsing, but probably facing early elections, which is good news. But still touching the problems, they are broader. I say, of course, that Slovakia is not an important country, but the thing is that we are in Central Europe, and there are happening things which are not, nice. Not talking about the Austria, which now becomes a partner of far-right Central European governments. Who knows? There are some strange developments. The one thing is that Mr. Fico has changed the foreign policy from one day to another with, and again, surprising and shocking speed. From one almost day to day, from the Slovakia, which was supportive to Ukraine, he now is speaking about Ukraine as an enemy. It's a quotation. He says Ukraine is our enemy. He says today, by the way, Mr. Zelensky is my enemy. Well, it's weird. Never said about that about Mr. Putin any time. He changed the foreign policy in a way that actually the enemies are not only Ukraine. The enemies not by vocabulary, but by the freezing relationship with Czech Republic. Czech government, there was a tradition that Slovak and Czech government, after the split, to show their good relationships between Czechs and Slovaks, the Slovak and Czech government regularly had once or twice a year common sessions, 2 governments together. It was a show of how how close we are to each other, Slovaks and Czechs, whatever. Czech government stopped this habit in spring already a year ago because of deep, disappointment of attitude of Slovakia toward Ukrainian. So the reaction was quite rude. However, Slovak and Czech relationships now on the level of government are just freezing. They don't talk to each other. Maybe sometimes only some formal signs of any kind of communication, which is still for people still don't understand. But this is a major change. I mean, the history of Czechoslovakia, you know, hopefully. Well, the relations between Czechs and Slovaks has a history of maybe 100 or 150 years, from 19th century to these days, as the closest nations in Europe. Even after the split, or even much more after the split, they are the closest nations together, with a common history of the 100 years, as in one state, except the Second World War. So it's shocking, and on the other hand, Mr. Fico is now the best friend of Mr. Orbán with Hungary, which in Slovak mind, Hungary is the biggest enemy of the Slovak nation, because we lived in Hungarian Empire 1,000 years, and all schools, all education is about the Hungarians were brutal on Slovaks. They almost killed the language. They didn't, and now, I mean, until now, of course. And now, you see, what's going on? We are the best friends with Hungarians now. I mean, to shift this historical narrative is a big challenge. And I'm not sure that it can happen, but you never know. Might be a Stockholm complex of, you never know. You never know. But it's a major shift. You wouldn't expect that in your dreams, that the collapse of Czech and Slovak relationships. The other thing is that you don't make an enemy only from Ukraine. The Poland, it's not said, but Mr. Fico, well, he met Prime Minister Donald Tusk once. Even he was not there on the polite visit after he became a premier. He was not in Poland. He met with Donald Tusk in autumn last year, somewhere privately in High Tatras for 2 hours discussion. So there is no relation with Poland. So Slovakia is a country, not important country, in a small Central European country, surrounded by enemies which were created by itself. It's just, you look at that and you say, what is going on? Is this, what is Mr. Fico thinking about this country? Of course I know, he relies on Mr. Putin, that, what he says, even European Union is our enemy. He speaks about European Union like about enemy. He says about, and I quote, about European countries like so-called democracies. He doesn't say he's so-called democracies, because they don't accept his view of Ukrainian and Russian war. And because of course everybody in European Union now, I mean, Fico is totally isolated. He was not in European state. And last year he didn't visit any European state at all. Nothing. He visited China, Brasilia, Putin, of course, in Russia in last December, South Korea, and Serbia. But he had not a single visit in European Union state. So you look at that and think, what is going on? This autocratic guy is leading the country, very small and quite well, not able to defend itself into dangerous waters surrounded by the enemies. Well, I think that there is no answer to that except madness or complete ignorance of what would happen to Slovakia as a country. He thinks only about himself, Mr. Fico, and how to save his own future. So that's a kind of thing that is difficult to understand. I know that this is I'm in Vienna. I'm not happy what's going on in politics in this country. But there are a couple of things. My observation is that what has done FVP is a suicide, which is the same is happening to the junior party in Slovakia, which they made a coalition with Smer, with Mr. Fico's party. The junior partner is a party named Hlas, which now has a president, Pellegrini, who was a founder of this party, which got in elections, I think, about 15%. However, they had an option to create the bigger coalition with the democratic parties against Mr. Fico. But Mr. Pellegrini at that time decided to go with Mr. Fico for various reasons, mostly because of business, or he was scared because it could be he probably was blackmailed, whatever. This party is facing destruction already, year after. So I think that the case of FVP in Austria could be very similar, or at least not maybe destruction, but the kind of the fractions which just probably leave the country or whatever, or the party. I can't understand whether they don't understand the danger or not. I mean, I'm not a big admirer of political intellect, but still, this is such a stupidity. You just wonder. The other thing is, it's quite important what kind of ministry will get FPÖ. Because when I'm talking about culture and Minister of Environment, it's because the Mr. Fico was stupid or clever enough, who knows. The party, both ministries got the party of the third junior partner, the Slovak National Party, was a bunch of lunatics, fascistic lunatics. So he gave them environment and culture to destroy nature and culture, based also on ideology somehow, ideology of fascism, basically. But for example, the Minister of Education, which is a minister from this party, Hlas, the second junior party, actually is probably the best ministry in the government, not touched even by the ideology. So it very much depends which guy from which party or who will get what ministers. Minister of Education, I think Austria hasn't a Minister of Culture, is it only Education or something? It's pretty crucial. If FPÖ gets that, you are very unhappy. So at least it makes sense to fight for the ministers which are crucial for survival of society, education, culture, I would say environment as well.
Martin, thank you very much for
okay,
that.
oh, it's so long, yeah.
Yeah, because we've, I want to let the audience have some questions as well.
Oh my God.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry. That's all right, that's all right. But I wanted to, I mean, the picture you describe of Slovakia is actually very different from the picture we have of Hungary. and there are two aspects to that. One is the character of Orbán and the character of Fico. Clearly, Orbán, as you described Fico, Orbán sounds like a much more strategic, well-organized, and almost certainly intellectually more gifted figure than Fico. But there's also, underlying what you're saying, a kind of hopelessness about Slovak political culture. And I'm not sure if is that part of the problem, that Slovakia really has not developed that much over the past 35 years or so? Am I misinterpreting that?
It is a problem, but it's not only the problem only of Slovakia. I mean, when you look at even Czech Republic, for example, I mean, you have an impression. Maybe it's just nostalgia of the past, but I have an impression. I observe politics all my life. I mean, I think that the political elite is just worse and worse, more and more stupid, more and more populistic, and less caring of ideas. And this is a result, of course. On the other hand, yeah, well, I mean, Mr. Fico's party is already reduced only he himself called Social Democrats, which was funny already 20 years ago. But today it's just ridiculous. He is far right. By definition, he's far right in a sense, the party itself, even more than AfD in Germany, in a sense of against Europe, pro-Russian, by all definition of cultural issues. He's now talking about constitution, only two sexes will be defined by constitution, whatever. So I don't think that it's only the case of Slovakia, that the culture of politics is so low. I think I would say it's kind of a broader problem. I mean,
although what you're
we can talk about Britain. So
sure,
I mean,
don't worry. I yield to no person in my criticism of the political culture of the United Kingdom, I can assure you. But the point is what you're suggesting is that Fico is not going to last very long. I.e., he's not going to do an Orbán of, strategically seizing all the mechanisms of democracy early on. As you said, he's been unable to control, partly because you said he wasn't interested in it in mainstream media, and that is very, very important. I mean, usually the first thing you do is secure daily television news on the state broadcaster, and from what you're saying, he's failed to do that, and the private station is good. So there's a level of hopelessness about Fico which you don't see with somebody like Orbán.
Sure.
And he certainly doesn't have the charisma and threatening power of a Trump. So it's really there's something about Fico which he's just not a very good populist leader.
Well, I mean, yes, but he had won the elections 4 times in Slovakia. Yep. Be careful. I mean, he's very talented as a populist. There are 2 things which happened. I mean, there was assassination. He was shot in May last year, and he has changed. He has obviously post-traumatic syndrome, which he didn't recognize, just refused to recognize that. Just 2 weeks ago, which is quite unusual. If you look at the Slovak society, there are a lot of protests, not only on the streets, which were last Friday, the biggest in years and years. 800 psychiatrists and psychologists signed a letter, open letter to Mr. Fico, that he is not fit for his office, saying that you really suffer by syndrome, post-traumatic or something, that they defined it, that's a problem for him. And also that he he is dangerous for society speaking hate speech. And that's harms society. So they call him to leave or to get, he should go to hospital.
Did he respond to that letter?
Yeah, of course. It's conspiracy.
Right.
Of course. Everything is conspiracy by foreign agents. But he has really changed. After that assassination, he really changed, and he became a madman. He doesn't mean that he's still not dangerous.
I would say rather it actually might increase his danger.
Yeah, his aggressivity and brutality increased, but he still is able to say things you are shocked. And of course, he still believes that if he cannot control the media, he still believes in his own charisma, and he doesn't speak anymore to journalists almost at all, like Mr. Orbán, who he got his advice from Mr. Orbán. So he has every week, maybe even more sometimes, his own videos on Facebook mostly, 10 minutes of speech, which when you look at that and hear that, it's just complete, it's bullshit on one hand. On the other hand, it's just, he's far the most popular celebrity on Facebook in Slovak social media. Comparing to the reach of, if you compare it with the number of population, he's more popular than Beyonce in the US. In Slovakia, it's hundreds of thousands of followers on Facebook, so he is still good at being a populist and dangerous. I mean, that's one thing that you never know. I mean, the thing is, it's kind of a, sometimes I try to think about, to put myself into his brain. But the imagination of evil is something we cannot never compete. I mean, last Friday there were biggest demonstrations across 20 Slovak towns, like in Serbia, protesting against Fico's politics, but also because he started to speak about Slov exit, about that we should actually exit European Union, because whatever. I mean, he started to say that it's a campaign which he prepares himself for the future. So people went into the streets, and he said, well, yeah, there were many people, okay, but third of them, and I was thinking how he would
characterize them,
or how he would defend that. He said, well, it doesn't matter because third of them were Ukrainians. And you wouldn't, if you even try to think about how to, invent any kind of argument, you wouldn't come to that. Such a stupidity, but it's working because his voters hate Ukrainians. So the imagination of evil he still has pretty much. He's very creative. I wouldn't
underestimate
it. Yeah.
Let me throw it open to the audience now. Do we have questions from the audience? If so, raise your hand. If you could identify yourself before your question, that would be very helpful to us. And we have a microphone so that everyone can hear.
Thank you. I'm Harvey Zoden. I'm American. I used to work for Jimmy Carter. My question is this. Churchill said that democracy is the worst system of government except for every other one that's been tried from time to time. So going from the micro of Slovakia to the macro, what does this mean? What's going on in your country, in my country, in Israel, et cetera, and others? What does it mean for democracy? And have we reached an end point, or are there correctives from your experience that you've been living through that can make democracy function? I'm interested in those kinds of aspects. Thanks.
Well, I don't know how about, I mean, I would be afraid to comment American future, but I still, the problem is that actually what all of I have said about Slovakia today, formally, it's still democracy. I mean, formally. We still have independent media. We still have actually not a rule of law. I mean, forget it. I mean, of course, but we still can hope for free and maybe not completely fair, but still free elections. Despite all the things I say, they already abolished kind of procedures they try to, the opposition in parliament has tough times because, you know, they stopped the discussions, whatever, and constitutional court didn't react. I mean, they approved the laws which, for example, Czech constitutional would never approve, but Slovak is just not good enough. So I would say, but still, it is formally, maybe it's not liberal democracy anymore, but democracy it is. At least, I mean, come on, the voters voted for that. You should have asked why. Why the voters, not the majority, but enough voters to create a coalition of majority in parliament. I have to respect that, although I have my doubts about these voters, whatever. But they still have this, they decided. My hope is that that future people still believe in democracy. I mean, even Fico himself doesn't dare to say that I would like to be, Orbán says it openly. Fico doesn't say he's not a Democrat. He still defends himself as a Democrat. He still defends himself like, I have, my voters voted for me. So what? Respect the voters. So even himself and the voters themselves, if you ask them, they believe in democracy, whatever it is, in their minds, but at least in the elections, they believe in that. So if you, I mean, from practical thing, I mean, cynical, but practical, well, my son is an oppositional leader of the opposition now, and actually in polls he would win the elections today. He's in front of Mr. Fico already. That's why Mr. Fico hates him so much. But, well, actually, his tactic is clear. Of course he's an idealist, believing liberal democracy and LGBT rights and whatever. But he says, okay, that's right, but this will not give me enough votes. I mean, people really want is not even maybe justice, but kind of a, well, security, life in not all the time this kind of tension, and of course living better. Knowing this, the only goal is actually, of course, not to lose your voters, but to demobilize the voters of the others. What Trump has succeeded in was to mobilize his own voters by hatred against everybody else, and Mr. Fico is doing the same. So the Democrats have to be realistic. They shouldn't fight the same fight the populists want to. Because Mr. Fico is wanting to fight all on Ukrainian question, on LGBT and whatever, because he knows that he mobilizes voters. To be Democrat by practice, a politician, you should have your own topics, own agenda, not to jump on the populist rhetorics, because that's what that suits them. That, I think, is a kind of a lesson for the future.
There's a question here.
Paul Michalevich, I'm a historian in Vienna, but my father was Ukrainian. Also this background. Actually, can I come back to the voters? Because his past was socialist, communist, and that's where his voters. Did he change completely the way voters? Are there now different voters than before? Or is it just anti-everything, anti-Ukrainian, pro-Russians? Other people have also undergone strange developments. Jan Czarnogórski, whom I've known for decades, turning out to be pro-Russian. So is it a general shift? Or is it just his area? What does he actually get the voters from?
Just to put some context for people, Jan Czarnogórski, who was mentioned, was there there were two dissidents in Slovakia, basically. There was Milan Šimečka and Jan Černogorský. Černogorský was a conservative Catholic dissident, and he has subsequently embraced a form of nationalism which sees Russia as a more natural partner to Slovakia than the West.
That's a sad story, yeah. But I think there are two explanations. One, yes, he has changed. Mr. Fico has changed. He was a former communist, of course, as a guy. He never had any ideas. I mean, he's a strange figure because, I mean, 15 years ago, as a journalist, I talked to him for 2 or 3 years off record. It was interesting meeting with him.
When was this, just out of interest?
2009. He still respected me as a journalist who was somehow independent, whatever. So we talked. And he was open. He said he doesn't believe in any ideas like freedom, justice. That's bullshit. It's only about, I mean, even the politics of geopolitics is only in our interests, no ideas at all. The politics itself, people need bread and safety, nothing else. Don't think about any ideas. He didn't believe in anything. But he knew his electorate, which was post-communist, so he was very kind of talking about social security and all these kind of things, with a very good relationship with trade union and all these kind of things. But after the last time when he lost his prime minister post his office, when after 2018, after this murder of Jan Kuciak and the journalist, he was almost down, but he decided because of being scared that he would go to prison. So he changed himself, his rhetoric to the far right, but also part of electorate. Part of his electorate are pure fascists, some of them still loyal to him from the past. So it's a combination. He changed himself, he somehow partially changed his electorate or changed the mind of his electorate. So it's both, it's complicated, but he still has support of this 20%, which is much lower than he used to have in the past. The story it's a story of Mr. Fico, it's a story of a man you can watch. It's a little bit like Mr. Trump in a sense that he's non-person. He has no story. It's just about politics all the time. His own personal story doesn't exist. Of course, he has his lovers, he has his rich man, but it's so uninteresting. All you can follow is his political story, which is sometimes, it's not boring because it's dangerous, but otherwise,
Just out of interest, what do members of the Hungarian minority think of Fico and this peculiar situation? Because as a populist, he's also striking nationalist tones, particularly with the Slovak National Party and so on.
That's also a sad story because Hungarian minority had been for almost 25 years as a party in parliament. More or less 8% they got by voters of Hungarian minority. And until then, there were every time this pro-democratic party, West-oriented, pro-European, defending democratic values. This has changed. I mean, first of all, a party didn't get into the parliament because they got only 4% because there were tensions, they had quarrels. I mean,
so they were split politically.
Yeah, it's complicated. That's one thing. The other is that Mr. Orbán's influence on South Slovakia, where the Hungarian minority lives, is huge. Well, these people watch Hungarian TV. So I would say now, yes, at least half, if not more, of these voters are pro-Orbán. So his influence of Mr. Orbán, because also Mr. Orbán is pouring money, a lot of millions of euros,
to the sport clubs, to the schools in South Slovakia, to the Hungarian minority, reconstructing buildings, whatever. So he cares a lot, so people like him. That's a bad news for the future if Hungarian minority gets its representation into the parliament. They would go with Mr. Fico, not with the Democrats. That's not a good news.
I see a question from Mr. Franz Graf, late of this parish. No, I think we need it for I think Hitch needs it for the recording.
Hello, Hitch. Hello. Thank you very much. I've one question relating back to the quote you used from Anne Applebaum, or you said Fico doesn't care about the people. And especially during the discussion, I'm now wondering if you could relate that, or if that's something that is relatable to the sentiments or the accusation that's actually coming by populist parties or populist leaders and those that vote for them, the sentiment that the liberal elite does not care, does not listen to the opinion of the people and not look for their livelihoods. So I wonder if you could comment on that.
Oh well, of course. I mean that's a thing which all of us, at least, who are the liberals, we have to ask the question: what happened? Why populists are so popular now? Or I mean, yes. And thing is that basically, I don't want to go to this deeper. Yes, but yes, I would say that. Even democratic parties, and not talking only about the liberal parties, yes, they failed. Failed in competition with the populists because people had a feeling they didn't care of them. And it's not by chance that another symptom, which is typical for Hungary and Slovakia, maybe some others, is that populists came to power by completely failure of previous liberal parties and governments. I mean, there was a Hungarian Gyurcsány government completely failed, corrupted. Slovak case, Mr. Fico wouldn't win the elections if it is not the previous government, which was democratic. I mean, yeah, the voters voted very badly for the populist named Igor Matovic, who was then a prime minister. He got 20%. Completely nonsense. The guy he's a populist, but let's say democratic, at least pro-Western populist. But so stupid. Yeah, there was pandemic, there was Ukrainian war, but the government was so chaotic, so stupid. The coalition parties were not able to agree on anything. So people were so frustrated because that should have been a democratic alternative to Mr. Fico from the past. And it failed completely. People felt that these Democrats completely betrayed them, didn't care of them. So you are completely right. And the new task of the Democrats and liberals is to find a way how to convince the voters, yes, we care of you. And it's actually what my son is trying to do now. But it's a task which you face decades of mistrust. And that will be a very hard job.
I see one more hand at the back there. I can't quite see who it is because I don't have my long distance glasses on.
Thank you. My name is Birgit Daiber. I have a question concerning the judiciary. You explained that Fico changed the laws, putting down the penalties for corruption and other crimes and reducing the time for prescription. Is he stopping there or is he going further? I think it was today that they said in the US, Trump made those who investigated into his alleged crimes lost their jobs. What about Slovakia? Is there this policy going on? Is there this chilling effect on every prosecutor saying, oh, perhaps I shouldn't investigate, perhaps they come to power or I have powerful friends, and then there will be this effect on me personally?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, first of all, I mean, this is a case which is a serious question. What happened, because the previous government actually gave the free hand to justice, prosecution, police, whatever, so they started to investigate the corruption and crimes or whatever. It was such a massive change, because there was a kind of a political non-written agreement that politicians shouldn't go to prison, whatever they did. Well, it was a Slovak kind of a non-written agreement, whatever. And this has changed. So there was a kind of a revolution that Fico never expected that. He was shocked. We, the politicians, should go to prison. We are investigated. We are interrogated. I mean, the police come to our places. I mean, what is this? And the question is whether it was actually good politically good, because you actually attacked the previous system, completely corrupted, but a very strong one. I mean, a huge system, many people involved. You cannot all them put in the prison in 1 year. So it took time, and it started to defend itself. I mean, there had a lot of people in police, still among prosecutors, judges, they started to defend. It's a case of Romania, was 10 years ago. When you started to attack, to try to kill the corruption system and the corrupted elites. And, well, you have very deeply think how to do that effectively, or don't do it rather in such a way if you are not effective. Because in Romania it failed, and the reaction is revenge. So, what is Mr. Fico doing, and all these Minister of Justice and Police, Minister of Interior, there is a revenge. There are prosecutors who were fired, or they are now investigated by police, by abusing their power, whatever. There are people from police, the best investigative unit, which was completely, of course, disbanded, are in home prison, actually, that they cannot work as police, but they also cannot leave it. They have to be at home, only 30% of salary. So there is actually, in Slovakia, there is a fundraising for these people to collect money that they can live. And it was successful. 200,000 euros was fundraised for these, I think, 10 policemen, at least to make decent life, even. So, yes, the revenge is huge, and it doesn't end. It's going on. It's more and more. So there is only a question when I'm pretty sure that if this goes on, so there will even politician from opposition will investigate it or might go into prison. That would be, of course, a dramatic change, because unlike Orbán never did this mistake. He never sent an oppositional politician or even a journalist to jail. He was clever enough not to do that. Mr. Fico is not clever enough, and he's going this way. So, well, we have to face that probably. And Mr. Trump is doing the same, yeah.
Well, tonight's lecture is over, but the conversation continues, and indeed downstairs with, as I said, wine and cheese. But before we go there, please a big round of applause for Martin Shimečka.
Thank you.
Come on. Thank you. I apologize.